I recognize the member for Guelph.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm pleased to speak I'm pleased to speak on Bill 123, the Reserve Parking for Electric Vehicles Act, which would make it a finable offence to park a non-charging vehicle in an EV charging space. In the spirit of cooperation, I am pleased to be co-sponsoring this bill with the honourable member from Whitby, because I will always be a constructive member working across party lines to put forward legislation that benefits people and planet. And I hope no one in this House will doubt that the future of driving is zero-emission electric and fuel cell vehicles. Business experts, financial analysts, and car companies all agree on this, Speaker. Over the next 5 years, global automakers will invest $255 billion in electric vehicle research and development. The International Energy Agency estimates that the number of electric vehicles on the road will climb from a current 6 million to 127 million in the next decade. 17 countries have already announced plans to phase out gasoline-powered vehicles, including the two most populous countries on the planet, China and India. Companies are going all in on zero and low-emission vehicles. As a matter of fact, all Volvo car models launched after 2019 will be electric or hybrid. 2/3 of Ford Motor Companies, not the Premier, but the motor companies' vehicles will be electric by 2030. Speaker, I want Ontario to be a part of leading the electric vehicle revolution that is sweeping around the world. And I believe that Bill 123 is an important, albeit small, step on the road to making sure Ontario is ready for the electric vehicle future. I want to credit and thank Guelph City Councillor Phil Alt for approaching me about sponsoring just this kind of bill. He approached me earlier this year in the spring after travelling across Ontario in his electric vehicle and finding it challenging when he pulled off to charge and found a number of charging spots being occupied by vehicles that were not charging. This can be a serious issue for electric vehicle drivers. As a matter of fact, Speaker, just last week, I have an electric vehicle and I travel between Guelph and Toronto to Queen's Park. And I have a regular spot I stop to charge. And just last week when I stopped there, there was a gentleman who pulled in right after me and all the spots were full, and a number of those spots by non-electric vehicles. And he said to me, somebody has got to do something about this problem. This happens to me all the time. I'm sick and tired of it. And I looked at him and I said, sir, I will get on that right away. And he asked me, he said, who are you, by the way? And I said, well, I'm the MPP for Guelph, and we'll be debating this very issue next week in the legislature. I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but a lot of electric vehicle owners like myself, we have apps that tell us where to find an electric vehicle charging station. And on those apps, it actually tells you whether the charging station is in use or not. And so you depend on the app. It says the charging facility is available. You may be getting low on electricity, and you go there to charge your car, and there's somebody else in the spot not using the charger, essentially making the information on the app inaccurate. And if you're pretty low, that's a pretty serious issue. It's kind of like, if I could put it in perspective for people who drive gasoline-powered cars, it's kind of like pulling off at the gas station and having a whole bunch of cars parked in front of all the gasoline pumps and you can't access the pump to fill your car up. Imagine what that does to your ability to commute. It's a serious risk for EV drivers. And as a matter of fact, it's probably one of the biggest barriers that's preventing people from purchasing electric vehicles, something known as range anxiety. Worried about running out of electricity and not having a place to charge. Because, Speaker, I want to be clear that the barrier to electric vehicles really isn't cost as much anymore. Because I want people in Ontario to know this, you can operate an electric vehicle for 1/5 the price of a gasoline-powered vehicle. And that's a conservative estimate. Whenever I say it, electric vehicle owners say, well, actually, I operate mine at 1/10 the cost, because the cost of electricity is much less than purchasing gasoline, and the cost of maintenance to operate your vehicle are substantially less as well. And so I think this bill highlights the need not only to have legislation in place to make sure that electric vehicle charging stations are available to motorists, but also highlights the need to increase the amount of electric vehicle infrastructure in Ontario. And so it highlights the need to retrofit much of our infrastructure, the inevitable future that's coming with the growth in electric and zero-emission vehicles. So, Speaker, this bill is one piece in a large puzzle to solve this emerging issue. As a matter of fact, an expert on this saying that Canada needs to get up to speed. So an expert recently from the Smith School of Business at Queen's University described Canada as a curious bystander when it comes to electric vehicles. He says that we're falling behind other countries who are being much more aggressive rolling out electric vehicle infrastructure. And I'm sure we've all had families and friends who have said they would like to purchase an electric vehicle but are worried about the lack of infrastructure and charging stations. I hear it time and time again. So, Speaker, I want to commit today to work with all parties in this legislature to come up with solutions to advance and expand electric charging infrastructure in Ontario. Currently, there is not a single EV charging station at an en route in Ontario, for example. And so I think there's no reason for us to be in a situation where every cafe, restaurant, fast food outlet, shopping mall, parking garage, en route, and other businesses to have EV charging stations, and to have rules which are outlined in Bill 123 to make sure those stations are available to drivers. I want to encourage us to think about things like creating tax incentives for businesses to invest in EV charging infrastructure. Maybe we could take the provincial portion of the HST off electric vehicles. We could look at installing electric charging facilities in government-owned parking lots, for example. So we can look at ways to roll out more EV infrastructure in this province. I believe it's essential for us to do this in order to attract jobs and investment, to generate prosperity in Ontario, to be part of rolling out an electric vehicle strategy for the province, to attract more investment. Because electrifying our transportation system is going to be essential to meeting our climate obligations and to maintaining prosperity in our economy. So I hope all members of this House will vote in favour of this bill, which is an important small step to ensuring that drivers have access to electric vehicle charging stations in Ontario.
Thank you. Further debate?